The curved glass of the observation window seemed too thin a barrier between Commander Alan Foster and the cold vacuum of space. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the enormous conclave station rotate slowly against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars. 73 years since first contact, and he still felt like an unwelcome guest at every meeting. The room behind him buzzed with quiet conversation. 23 alien species were represented here today, their bodies ranging from the insectoid Hexrith to the gaseous Vorn who floated in specialized containment suits. Only one human stood among them, Ambassador Susan Miller, Earth's chief diplomat for the past 15 years. Alan checked his watch. The formal session would begin in 10 minutes, and he already knew how it would end. Another rejection, another delay, another excuse why humanity couldn't expand beyond their home system. Commander. The voice came from behind him, soft but firm. Susan approached, her diplomatic uniform crisp despite the 18-hour journey to reach the station. "You're scowling again." Alan tried to relax his face. "Sorry, Ambassador. Just thinking about the last 7 meetings." "This one could be different," Susan said, though her eyes lacked conviction. "They're going to say no again." Susan adjusted her collar. "Probably. But we keep trying." A chime rang through the chamber, signaling delegates to take their places. Susan straightened her shoulders and moved toward the central platform. Alan followed 2 steps behind as protocol demanded. The main chamber of the conclave station was designed to impress. Soaring ceilings with moving light patterns reflected the current galactic time. The delegation seats were arranged in concentric circles with the oldest member species, the founding 7, occupying the innermost ring. Earth's assigned spot was in the outermost circle, beside species that had joined the conclave even more recently. The Krellnax representative, first speaker Zarn, took the central podium. His feathered crest rose to its full height, the purple and blue plumage signaling formal authority. "The 418th session of the Expansion and Security Council is now in session," Zarn announced, his translator converting the series of clicks and whistles into standard conclave English. "We will hear petitions in order of submission. The Human Cooperative of Sol System may present their case." Susan walked to the speaking platform with measured steps. Alan had watched her perform this ritual 11 times before. Each time she found new words to make the same request. Each time she was denied. "Honorable representatives of the conclave," Susan began, her voice clear and steady. "Earth thanks you for considering our petition. We come again to request permission to establish our first colony beyond the Sol system, on the 4th planet of the star you call Proxima Dareth, which our surveys show is uninhabited and suitable for human life with minimal terraforming." Quiet murmurs rippled through the chamber. Alan noticed several delegates from the middle rings exchanging glances. "We have complied with all conclave regulations for emerging spacefaring species," Susan continued. "We have limited our military vessels to the approved number and specifications. We have shared our scientific discoveries as required by Article 7 of the Membership Preparation Protocols. We have demonstrated peaceful intentions for 73 years. Zarn's feathers rippled slightly. A gesture Alan had learned indicated impatience. "The human population has grown by 12% since our last petition," Susan said. "Our resource requirements are increasing beyond what our home system can sustainably provide. This modest expansion would relieve pressure on Earth's ecosystems while demonstrating our commitment to responsible growth." When Susan finished her presentation, she stood waiting for questions. The chamber remained silent for several uncomfortable moments. Finally, Zarn spoke. "The Council acknowledges the human petition. Are there comments from the senior representatives?" The Vudran delegate, a massive reptilian being, activated his speaking light. "The humans have shown restraint in their military development, which we acknowledge. However, their history of internal conflict makes their species unsuitable for expansion beyond containment boundaries at this time." Alan felt his jaw tighten. The same argument, every time. The Juxil representative spoke next, her 6 limbs moving in the elegant gestures of her species. "The human civilization is merely 400 years into its technological phase. The standard observation period is 1,000 years minimum. We cannot make exceptions based on resource needs. One by one, representatives from the inner and middle rings voiced their concerns. Too aggressive. Too unpredictable. Too young a species. Not enough evolutionary maturity. Susan stood calmly through it all, not showing the frustration Alan knew she must feel. When the comments finished, she was allowed a brief response. "We understand the conclave's caution," she said. "Perhaps we could discuss a probationary period for this single colony, with conclave observers present to ensure compliance with all regulations." Sarn's feathers flattened against his head. "The Council will deliberate on the human petition and provide a response in due course. Next petition, the Gorvan Union requests increased antimatter production quotas." Just like that, they were dismissed. No vote, no timeline for a decision, just another delay. Susan returned to Alan's side as they moved back to their observation area. "That went as expected," Alan said quietly. "Actually, 2 fewer objections than last time," Susan replied with a small smile. "Progress is measured in small steps, Commander." Alan's secure communicator vibrated against his wrist. He frowned. Interruptions during conclave sessions were strictly forbidden, except for genuine emergencies. "Excuse me, Ambassador," he murmured, stepping away to check the message. The text scrolling across his secure screen made his blood run cold. "Priority Alpha. Unknown vessels detected near Mars colony. Multiple ships. Non-conclave design. Weapons signatures detected. Mars defense grid activated. Requesting immediate instructions." A second message followed immediately. "Europa outpost under attack. Casualties reported. No response from conclave. Emergency channels." Alan looked up at the chamber full of alien delegates, all calmly discussing production quotas while human outposts were being attacked. He caught Susan's eye and gave the subtle hand signal they had established for critical situations. She smoothly excused herself from conversation with a minor delegate and joined him by the window. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low. "Mars and Europa are under attack. Unknown ships. The conclave emergency channels aren't responding." Susan's diplomatic mask slipped for just a moment, showing shock and anger before she controlled her expression. "Again, we need to leave immediately," she said, but quietly. "If the conclave is ignoring our distress calls, there's more happening here than we understand." As they made their way toward the exit, Alan noticed the Krelnak's representative watching them with an unreadable expression. For a brief moment, Alan thought he saw something like satisfaction in the alien's posture. "Ambassador," Alan said softly, as they entered the corridor leading to the Earth shuttle bay, "I think they knew this was going to happen." Susan's steps didn't falter, but her voice hardened. "If that's true, Commander, then 73 years of patience may have been 73 years too many." The diplomatic shuttle departed the conclave station exactly as scheduled. Nothing in their behavior suggested emergency, but as they cleared the station security zone, Susan turned to Alan with cold determination in her eyes. "Send the message to Earth Command," she said. Code phrase, "Patience exhausted." Alan nodded grimly as he transmitted the short, encrypted signal that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Dr. Olivia Reyes rubbed her tired eyes as the red emergency lights continued to pulse throughout the underground Mars research station. 36 hours without sleep was pushing her to the limit, but there was no time to rest. Not with what they had discovered. The holographic displays surrounding her workstation showed feeds from across the solar system. Europa's mining facility was partially destroyed. The research outpost on Titan had gone silent. 3 transport ships between Earth and the asteroid belt were missing. "Play the distress call again," she told the station's AI system. The voice of Gregory Wells, chief of the Europa facility, filled the room. His words were punctuated by the sound of explosions in the background. "They're not conclave." "Repeat, the attackers are not conclave. They're stripping everything, resources, technology, people. The conclave knew about this and did nothing." The recording ended with a crash and static. Olivia had listened to it 20 times already, trying to piece together what was happening. The door to the lab slid open. Lieutenant Jack Howard entered, his uniform dusty from the collapsed section of the station. 4 hours earlier, the unknown ships had bombarded the surface installations before moving on to other targets. Only the underground levels had survived. Status. Report? Olivia asked, pushing a cup of synthetic coffee toward him. Jack took the cup gratefully. Defense grid is back online. We've got communication with Earth and the lunar colonies again. Still nothing from Titan or Ceres. Casualties? 22. Confirmed in the surface buildings. Could have been much worse if we hadn't had the 3-minute warning from our deep space scanners. Olivia nodded grimly. The early detection system had saved hundreds of lives, giving people time to reach the underground shelters. But who were these attackers? And why had the Conclave ignored their distress calls? Any word from Ambassador Miller? Her shuttle is on the way back to Earth. Should arrive in about 6 hours. Jack pulled up a chair beside Olivia's workstation. What are you working on? Olivia gestured to the scattered data on her screens. Trying to identify the attack ships. They don't match any known Conclave designs, but they're definitely not from any unaffiliated species we've encountered. Could they be from beyond the Orion Arm? Unknown territory? I don't think so. Olivia pulled up a series of spectral analyses. Their engine signatures show elements of Conclave technology, but modified. Almost like her terminal chimed with an incoming transmission, heavily encrypted. Origin point, deep in Conclave territory. That's strange, she muttered, fingers flying over the controls to authenticate the message. This is coming from the Rigel Science Exchange. Jack leaned forward. That's where Dr. Peters is working, right? One of the few humans allowed to study at a Conclave facility? The message decoded on the screen. Short and urgent. The Conclave has known about the Vorleth raiders for centuries. They use them as unofficial proxies to keep emerging species contained. Earth isn't the first. Check archive file 7296B. Carol Olivia stared at the screen in shock. She's risking everything by sending this. The Vorleth, Jack repeated. I've never heard of them. Neither have I. Olivia's fingers were already bringing up the referenced archive file. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had access to all information humanity had gathered about galactic species. File 7296B was buried deep in the classified section. It contained fragmented data collected over decades, whispered rumors from minor Conclave species, disappearances of ships near the borders of Conclave space, theoretical analyses of technology salvaged from unknown vessels. This can't be right, Olivia whispered as she read through the file. According to this, the Vorleth aren't just raiders, they're colors. Jack read over her shoulder, his expression darkening. 3 other species that reached our level of development were completely eradicated in the last millennium. The Conclave policy is to wait until the raiders have weakened the problematic species before officially acknowledging the threat. By then it's too late, Olivia finished. The emerging civilization is too damaged to defend itself. And the Conclave swoops in as saviors, taking control of whatever remains. Olivia pulled up more data. Look at this pattern. The Vorleth attacks always begin the same way, targeting outposts, research stations, resource operations. They weaken the infrastructure before moving against population centers. We need to get this to Earth Command immediately, Jack said, already moving toward the communication station. Wait. Olivia grabbed his arm. There's more. According to these notes, Dr. Peters has been investigating this for years. She believes the Conclave doesn't just allow the Vorleth to operate, they direct them. The raiders target species that show too much independence or develop too quickly. Species like us, Jack said quietly. Exactly. Olivia's terminal chimed again with an incoming message, this time from Earth Command. The sender, General William Parker, Ambassador Miller has activated Protocol Revelation. Prepare Mars Station for Phase 2. Authorization code, Patience, Omega-7. Jack's eyes widened as he read the message. Protocol Revelation? That's been dormant since we first suspected the Conclave wasn't being honest with us, Olivia finished. She entered her authentication code and a hidden section of the database unlocked before them. The screens around them changed, displaying information neither of them had been cleared to see before. Schematics for ships unlike anything in Earth's official fleet. Weapons systems far beyond what humanity had admitted to developing. Defensive installations hidden throughout the solar system. Is this real? Jack whispered. Have we been building all this in secret? Not just building, Olivia said as she read through the newly accessible files. According to this, Project Contingency has been active for 50 years. While we played nice with the Conclave, limited our official military development, and accepted their restrictions, we've been preparing for exactly this scenario. Another message appeared on the screen. All personnel with clearance level Gamma or higher, report to emergency stations. Phase 2 begins in 3 hours. The patience of humanity has reached its end. Olivia and Jack exchanged glances. For 73 years, humanity had endured the Conclave's restrictions and condescension. They had followed the rules, petitioned politely, and accepted rejection after rejection, all while secretly preparing for the day when those rules would no longer apply. I need to get to the lower levels, Olivia said, gathering her data tablets. Sub-level 12 just became accessible with my clearance. What's on sub-level 12? Jack asked. Olivia's expression was a mixture of anticipation and grim determination. According to this, the Mars Defense Force we've shown the Conclave is just a fraction of what we actually have. The real fleet has been hiding in underground hangars and asteroid hollows for decades. Jack stared at her in disbelief. How could we hide something like that from Conclave scanners? That, Olivia said as they hurried toward the restricted elevator, is apparently what sub-level 12 is all about, and why they need xenobiologists like me for Phase 2. As the elevator doors closed behind them, the screens in the lab continued to update with reports from across the solar system. The Vorleth raiders were continuing their attacks, unaware that their targets had been expecting them for a very long time, unaware that humanity's decades of apparent submission had been the most elaborate deception in Earth's history. General William Parker stood before the United Earth Defense Council in the underground chamber beneath Geneva. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of air circulators. On the massive screen behind him, the evidence compiled by Dr. Reyes played in a continuous loop, recordings of the attacks, data on the Vorleth raiders, and the damning proof of Conclave involvement. 12 men and women sat at the circular table, representatives from Earth's major regions. Their faces showed a mixture of shock, anger, and grim determination. For 7 decades we've played by their rules, William said, his voice steady and calm despite the gravity of the situation. We limited our military development to approved technologies. We restricted our expansion. We believed we were earning trust and respect. He paused, looking at each council member in turn. We were wrong. Council Chair Nancy Rivera leaned forward, her gray hair falling around her face. What options do we have, General? The Conclave forces outnumber us significantly. William's expression remained neutral, but a subtle change came over the room as he activated his secure terminal. That's what they believe, Madam Chair. The display behind him changed to show schematics of vessels and weapon systems, unlike anything in Earth's official fleet. Ships with sleek, predatory lines. Defense systems that utilized principles the Conclave had never mastered. Weapons that could penetrate the supposedly impregnable shields of Conclave warships. Project Contingency, he explained. For 50 years, beneath the surface of Mercury, inside Neptune's moons, and within the asteroid belt, we've been developing technologies and building a fleet that the Conclave knows nothing about. Linda Hoffman, the European representative, looked stunned. How is this possible? The Conclave monitoring stations would have detected this activity. Because we learned early on that their detection systems have specific blind spots, William replied. Their technology evolved along different paths than ours. They rely heavily on quantum entanglement communication and graviton-based detection, but they're practically blind to certain neutrino emissions and tachyon bursts. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. We have a fleet that's been Preparing for 73 years, William continued. Ships with stealth capabilities the Conclave can't detect, weapons they don't understand, and defensive systems they can't penetrate. We've been patient hoping it wouldn't come to this. But now we know. Our patience wasn't earning respect. It was being mistaken for weakness. Frank Rogers, the African Union representative, raised his hand. The casualties from the Vorleth attacks? William's face hardened. 317 confirmed dead. 842 missing, presumed captured. The raiders targeted our scientific outposts first, then resource operations. Exactly as they've done to other species before elimination, Nancy said quietly. Yes, but unlike those other species, we're ready to respond. William brought up a new display showing the current positions of the raider vessels. They're following a standard pattern, moving methodically through our system. They believe we have only the defenses we've shown the Conclave. When do we strike back? Asked Kim Chen, the Asian Pacific representative. Ambassador Miller has already initiated the first phase of protocol revelation, William replied. She's currently aboard the Conclave Central Station near Proxima Centauri. Several council members exchanged worried glances. Isn't that dangerous? For her? Linda asked. Susan volunteered, William said with a hint of pride in his voice. She's been our chief diplomat for 15 years, playing the role of the patient, deferential human. No one will suspect her. The main door opened and Commander Alan Foster entered. He had just returned from the Conclave station with the ambassador and had come directly to the council chamber. His uniform was wrinkled from the long journey, but his posture was military straight. Commander, William acknowledged. Report on the ambassador's mission. Phase 1 completed successfully, sir, Alan replied. The devices were activated precisely on schedule. By now, every data terminal on the Conclave station is broadcasting the evidence. And not just to the station personnel, William added for the council's benefit. The transmissions are going to every member world of the Conclave, to the protected species under Conclave guidance, and to the independent worlds beyond Conclave space. The truth about how the Conclave has been using the Vorleth to eliminate competition is being revealed across the galaxy. Nancy stood up, her decision made. Begin Phase 2, General. William nodded and entered a command sequence into his terminal. Throughout the solar system, hidden installations came to life. On Mercury, enormous hangar doors opened in the planet's dark side, revealing rows of sleek warships. Inside Neptune's moon Triton, automated factories that had been producing advanced weapons for decades began loading them onto transport vessels. Within the asteroid belt, ships that had been disguised as mining operations dropped their camouflage and formed into battle groups. It will take 4 hours for our fleet to assemble, William said. The Vorleth raiders will be dealt with first. Then we move against Conclave military installations. Not civilian targets, Nancy clarified firmly. Never civilian targets, William agreed. Our quarrel is with the Conclave leadership and their Vorleth proxies, not with innocent populations. This is about justice, not revenge. Alan cleared his throat. Sir, Ambassador Miller wanted me to deliver a personal message to the council. William gestured for him to continue. She said to tell you, 73 years of diplomacy wasn't wasted. It bought us the time we needed. Now use that time wisely. The council members nodded in understanding. For 7 decades, Earth's representatives had endured countless diplomatic slights and rejections. They had smiled politely while Conclave officials dismissed humans as primitive and violent. All while Earth quietly prepared for this day. On the main display, a new feed appeared. Live. Images from the Conclave Central Station. Chaos had erupted as the truth was revealed. Species that had been loyal to the Conclave for millennia were demanding explanations. Protected worlds were calling for investigations. The carefully maintained facade of benevolent guidance had shattered. What happens after we neutralize the immediate threats? Kim asked. The Conclave still has vast resources. Phase 3, William replied. But that depends on how the Conclave responds to Phases 1 and 2. If they acknowledge their crimes and agree to reforms, we'll negotiate. If they choose to fight, he let the sentence hang unfinished. Linda looked troubled. Are we ready for a prolonged conflict? We've been ready for 50 years, William said simply. But I don't believe it will come to that. The Conclave maintains control through deception and manipulation, not military might. Once that deception is exposed, many of their member worlds will refuse to fight for them. The council chamber fell, silent again as the implications of the day's events sank in. After decades of patient preparation, humanity was about to change the balance of power in the galaxy, and no species would ever mistake their patience for weakness again. The Conclave Central Station orbiting Proxima Centauri was considered impregnable. Over 9 kilometers long, protected by energy shields and a defense fleet of 300 vessels, it served as the headquarters for Conclave operations in the human sector, which is why Ambassador Susan Miller's arrival in a single diplomatic shuttle caused no alarm. Susan walked through the grand entrance hall of the station with the same calm, professional demeanor she had maintained for 15 years. As Earth's chief diplomat, her assistant, a young man named Paul Evans, followed 2 steps behind, carrying what appeared to be standard diplomatic materials. The humans wished to present new evidence regarding the recent incidents in their system, she informed the station commander, a gelatinous Zendi who viewed her with 4 of its sensory stalks. The Conclave will hear your petition in due course, the commander replied, its translator converting the wet, gurgling sounds into flat English. The standard waiting period for emergency sessions is 14 solar cycles. Susan smiled politely. I'm afraid this can't wait. She activated her personal communicator. We're initiating protocol revelation. The Zendi's sensory stalks quivered in confusion. What protocol? This is not a recognized diplomatic. Throughout the station, concealed devices that had been smuggled aboard through diplomatic pouches over the past decade simultaneously activated, not weapons, something far more effective. Information transmitters. Every data terminal, every communication system on the station began broadcasting the same files, complete records of the Conclave's deliberate policy of containing and allowing the extermination of emerging species, including humans. And not just to the station personnel. The transmissions went to every member world of the Conclave, to the protected species under Conclave guidance, and to the independent worlds beyond. Conclave space. As chaos erupted around her, Susan calmly walked back to her shuttle. By the time the Conclave leadership realized what was happening, the second phase had begun. Paul hurried alongside her. Ambassador, security forces are mobilizing. They won't stop us, Susan replied, her voice steady. They're too busy dealing with the information leak, and they still think we're just helpless humans. As they reached the diplomatic docking bay, alarms began to sound throughout the station. Susan's shuttle was the only ship currently docked in this section, its sleek white hull bearing the Earth Diplomatic Corps emblem. Attention all station personnel, a voice announced over the public address system. Security breach in progress. All non-essential personnel return to quarters. Security teams to information systems control. Susan and Paul entered the shuttle and sealed the hatch behind them. The pilot, Captain Lisa West, was already running pre-flight checks. Status? Susan asked as she strapped into her seat. All systems go, Ambassador, Lisa replied. The station's defense grid is in disarray. They're scrambling to contain the information spread rather than focusing on us. Through the viewport, Susan could see security personnel running toward the diplomatic bay, but they were too late. The shuttle's engines fired and they pulled away from the docking port. Incoming transmission from the station, Paul reported from the communications console. Susan nodded. Put it through. The face of first speaker Zarn appeared on the main screen, his feathered crest fully extended in alarm and rage. Ambassador, Miller, return to the station immediately. You have violated multiple Conclave security protocols. Susan met his gaze calmly. Actually, first speaker, we've violated none of your stated rules. We simply shared information that you chose to keep hidden, about how the Conclave has been allowing the Vorlith raiders to attack developing species like ours. Zarn's feathers flattened against his head, a sign of surprise. How did you learn about the Vorlith? About how you've used them for centuries to eliminate species you consider threats? About how 3 other civilizations were destroyed this way while the Conclave watched and waited? Susan's polite diplomatic mask slipped, showing the steel beneath. We've known for decades, first speaker. We just needed proof that others would believe. Human vessels are approaching Conclave space, Zarn hissed. Vessels we have no record of. Explain this immediately. Those would be the ships. We built in secret while pretending to comply with your restrictions, Susan replied. The ones your sensors can't detect because they use technology you've never considered. Lisa's voice cut in, professional and calm. We're clear of the station's immediate defense perimeter, Ambassador. Entering stealth mode. On the screen, Zarn's expression changed from anger to confusion as the shuttle disappeared from his sensors. What is happening? Where are you going? To watch as decades of Conclave lies are exposed, Susan answered. I suggest you prepare your explanations for the other member worlds. They're quite interested in learning how many species you've sacrificed. The communication ended, and the shuttle accelerated away from the station, its advanced stealth systems rendering it invisible to Conclave tracking technology. Paul looked at Susan with newfound respect. All those years of diplomatic meetings, of being polite while they rejected us again and again, was it all just a cover? Susan gazed out at the stars. Not entirely. We genuinely hoped for peaceful cooperation. But we also recognized from the beginning that the Conclave might not be the benevolent alliance they claimed to be. So we prepared for both possibilities. At precisely coordinated moments across Conclave space, Earth's hidden fleet emerged from stealth at key strategic points, not to attack civilian targets but to neutralize military installations and capture the raiders' bases that the Conclave had pretended not to know about. On the shuttle's main display, tactical feeds showed the operation unfolding. Human ships, sleek, powerful vessels using technologies the Conclave had never encountered, appeared seemingly from nowhere near Conclave military outposts. The Vorleth base in the Sirius sector has been neutralized, Lisa reported, reading incoming data. Minimal casualties, 312 human prisoners recovered. The Conclave fleet at Rigel is standing down, Paul added. They're not even firing their weapons. Susan nodded in satisfaction. They rely too heavily on their supposedly superior technology. When faced with systems they don't understand, they hesitate. More reports flooded in. Throughout Conclave space, the carefully hidden human fleet was systematically disabling military installations with surgical precision. No civilian targets were engaged. No populated worlds were threatened. This was not a war of conquest, it was a controlled operation to neutralize the immediate threat and force accountability. Meanwhile, the information Susan had released continued to spread. On thousands of worlds, beings of all species were learning the truth about the Conclave's manipulations and the fate of problematic emerging civilizations. Incoming transmission, Paul announced. It's from the Mivrian High Council. Susan raised an eyebrow in surprise. The Mivrians were one of the founding species of the Conclave, ancient and powerful. Put it through. The wrinkled, blue-skinned face of Elder Sora appeared on the screen. Ambassador Miller, the Mivrian Council requests an immediate dialogue with Earth leadership. The evidence you have provided is disturbing. If verified, it suggests corruption at the highest levels of Conclave governance. We welcome dialogue, Elder Sora, Susan replied, and we can provide complete verification of all our claims. The Conclave Council is currently in emergency session, the Elder continued. Many member worlds are demanding explanations. Some are calling for the immediate removal of the current leadership. Susan allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps it's time for the Conclave to evolve, Elder. To become the organization it has always claimed to be. One that truly protects and guides, rather than controls and eliminates. As the shuttle continued its journey back to Earth, Susan reflected on the decades of preparation that had led to this moment. Humanity had finally revealed its true strength, not just in weapons and technology, but in patience, foresight, and the willingness to act decisively when the time came. Dutton. galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Conclave emergency session was unlike any in its 12,000-year history. For the first time, representatives from non-member species were permitted to attend, including those previously dismissed as evolutionarily immature. Admiral Ryan Peters, now representing Earth, stood calmly before the assembly. In just 7 days, the human fleet had disabled 70% of the Conclave's military capacity without a single civilian casualty. It was a demonstration of precision and power that had shocked the galactic community. The Great Chamber was filled to capacity. Along with the regular Conclave members, delegates from 43 protected worlds and 17 independent systems were present. All had come to witness this historic turning point. Ryan surveyed the room, noting the changed atmosphere. Gone was the usual arrogance of the inner circle species. Instead, there was tension, uncertainty, and in many cases, shame. Humanity does not seek revenge, Ryan stated clearly, his voice carrying through the chamber. We seek reform. The Conclave was founded on principles of guidance and protection, but it has become a system for suppression and control. Murmurs rippled through the gathered delegates. The evidence that Ambassador Miller had released was irrefutable. Records spanning centuries showed how the Conclave had deliberately contained developing species, using the Vorleth raiders to eliminate those deemed too independent or advanced. The Krelnak Supreme Counselor, once the most dismissive of human potential, now spoke with careful respect. What does Earth demand? Not demands, proposals, Ryan corrected. First, a complete reorganization of the Conclave to include equal representation for all spacefaring species. Second, an immediate end to the policy of containment. Third, reparations to the families affected by the raids that you permitted. He paused, looking around the chamber. We've shared only a fraction of our technological capabilities. Humanity doesn't want to rule or dominate. We want a genuine alliance, one that lives up to the ideals that the Conclave claims to represent. On the far side of the chamber, a group of delegates from the protected worlds applauded. They had suffered under Conclave restrictions for generations, always told they weren't yet ready for full membership. The Vudran representative, a massive reptilian being who had once argued against human expansion, rose to speak. The evidence presented by Earth is disturbing. The Vudran collective was not aware of the extent of these containment policies. Few were, Ryan acknowledged. The inner circle kept these decisions from most member worlds. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. The 7 founding species, who had controlled the Conclave from the beginning, shifted in their seats. We will need time to consider these proposals, the Mivrian elder Sora said finally. Of course, Ryan agreed. But understand that the old system is over. Earth will not return to containment. And we will share what we know with any species that asks. As the session continued, messages poured in from worlds throughout the galaxy. The revelations about Conclave policies had sparked movements for reform across dozens of systems. Species that had been kept isolated from each other were now establishing direct communication, bypassing Conclave channels for the first time. During a recess, Ryan met with General William Parker and Dr. Olivia Reyes in a private chamber off the main hall. William had directed the military operation from Earth, while Olivia had been instrumental in understanding the Vorleth biology and technology. How are the rescued prisoners? Ryan asked. Recovering well, Olivia replied. The 312 humans taken from our outposts are receiving medical care. We also found nearly 2,000 members of other species in the Vorleth bases, beings the Conclave had written off as lost. William nodded approvingly. Those rescues have done more for our standing with other worlds than any military action could have. The Tassel are particularly grateful. They lost an entire research colony to the raiders last year. Ryan looked thoughtful. And the Vorleth themselves, what have we learned? They're not naturally aggressive, Olivia explained. The Conclave has been controlling them through implanted technology for centuries. Without those controls, they're actually quite peaceful. We're working with their leaders now to establish a new home for them outside Conclave influence. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime. The session was reconvening. When they returned to the chamber, they found Elder Sora standing at the central podium. As the oldest member of the oldest species in the conclave, he commanded, "Respect even in these troubled times." "The founding council has deliberated," he announced, his ancient voice surprisingly strong. "We acknowledge the evidence presented by Earth. The policies of containment and the use of the Vorleth were violations of our founding principles." A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Few had expected such a direct admission. "The UAO conclave will be reformed," Sora continued. "All spacefaring species will have equal representation. The policy of containment ends today, and we will make reparations to all who suffered under these misguided actions." Ryan exchanged glances with William and Olivia. They had expected resistance, perhaps even a desperate military response. Not this acceptance. As if reading their thoughts, Sora turned to face the human delegation directly. "You wonder why we yield so readily? It is because you have shown us something we had forgotten. True strength is not in domination, but in restraint. For 73 years you prepared in secret while enduring our dismissals. You built a fleet that could have destroyed us, yet when the moment came, you chose precision over devastation." In a quiet moment during the next recess, the elder Mivrian approached Ryan privately. "We underestimated your kind," the ancient being admitted. "Not your technology or your strength, though those are impressive. We underestimated your restraint. Any other species with your capabilities after what was done to you would have sought vengeance." Ryan looked out at the stars visible through the station's transparent dome. "That's where you're wrong. Patience isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the most difficult form of strength." The Mivrian's skin shifted in the pattern that indicated deep thought. "No species will ever forget the moment humanity's patience finally broke," it said, echoing the phrase that had spread across galactic communications. "But perhaps what they will remember most is what you built after that moment." In the weeks that followed, the conclave transformed. The old hierarchy dissolved, replaced by a true council where all members had equal voice. Borders opened. Knowledge flowed freely between worlds for the first time in millennia. Earth established its first extrasolar colony, on the fourth planet of Proxima Dareth, just as they had requested for years. But it was only the beginning. Human ships now, operating openly, helped establish trade routes between formerly isolated worlds. Human scientists shared technologies that had been developed in secret. Human diplomats, led by Ambassador Miller, helped forge new alliances between species that had been kept apart by conclave policy. As Admiral Peters watched Earth's first colony ship depart for its new home, he reflected on the long path that had led to this moment. 73 years of patience, of preparation in the shadows while showing a face of compliance to the galaxy. Was it worth the wait? William asked, standing beside him at the viewport. Ryan smiled as he watched the ship disappear into the distance, carrying humanity's hopes to the stars. Every minute. Sometimes you have to be patient enough to let your opponent think they've won before you change the entire game. As the galaxy entered a new era, the old powers learned what humanity had known for millennia. True power isn't in domination, but in the wisdom to know when to hold back and when to finally act.